you by Budweiser. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Byron Dragway, just outside of Chicago in northern Illinois, for another United States Hot Rod Association Championship Mud Racing and Monster Truck event. I'm Brett Kepner, and we're at one of the nation's premier drag strips that's been converted over to the longest single mud pit in U.S. Hot Rod Association mud racing history. 200 feet long, championship mud, 48 inches deep, and this event will include the biggest names in U.S. Hot Rod Association mud racing today, including both the 1987 and 1988 world champions. Mike Farr has returned to the wheel of the Enforcer Jeep Funny Car, and he'll be battling the 1988 world champ Tom Martin in the infamous Mud Patrol 1932 Ford. Along with Martin and Fair, we've got the rest of the U.S. Hot Rod Association champions, Mark Greene, the incredible Mud Shark Corvette of Mike Erdelyi, all of them ready to do battle on the first ever 200-foot-long mud pit in U.S. Hot Rod Association history. We'll also be seeing championship monster truck racing with an incredible six-truck field of vehicles that indeed will bring us the best in that possible type of motorsports. Stay tuned, because the very first machine out on this 200-foot-long pit is the wildest car in the sport, Mike Erdelyi's Indiana Mud Shark Corvette. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Byron, Illinois, and you could not ask for a wilder way to start off U.S. Hot Rod Association mud racing action than with the wildest single machine in the sport of supermod mud racing. This is Mike Erdelyi out of Walkerton, Indiana, and the infamous Mud Shark 1964 Corvette. Any regular viewer of U.S. Hot Rod Association mud racing here on ESPN knows this machine as the single most scary vehicle in all of mud racing. Erdelyi driving a supercharged, fuel-injected, 2,000 horsepower Chevy-powered Corvette that never fails to excite the fans. If this machine goes straight, it'll set a record, but it very seldom makes it through the course without something going wild. Mike Johns, the co-owner of the machine, standing by on the starting line as Erdelyi will kick off the action on the longest pit ever for U.S. Hot Rod Association racers, 200 feet long. The supercharged Corvette Roadster leaves the line, wheels up. Erdelyi steers as hard as he can. It's sideways, up and over, out of the berm on the very first run. Erdelyi upside down, sitting on the side of the pit. The safety crews and track officials going up to make sure. It looks like he's moving inside. I was going to say to make sure that he's okay, and he's already out of the vehicle. Unbelievable job. The crowd obviously loves every minute of it, and Erdelyi kicks things off with a bang here at the Byron Dragway Championship Mud Racing event. Let's look at it again in slow motion. He never, ever lifted off the throttle. You can see him working always so hard in the cockpit. Now the machine takes a hard hook. It digs in. You can see that the tires digging into the mud is what put the Corvette over. You can see the transmission actually sideways in the chassis. It obviously bent the chassis going over. Erdelyi again gritting his teeth, fighting this incredible 2,000 horsepower machine like he has to on every run. Then it starts to drift sideways. The rear tire lands and digs in, throwing Erdelyi around in the cockpit. He hangs on as the Corvette goes for the ride of Mike Erdelyi's life. Unbelievable. There you see Erdelyi being towed off the racing surface itself. He is A-OK, checking out the damage, and he and crew chief Mike Johns certainly have their work cut out for him to repair that machine. Here's Lenny Iskierka in the 1987 Jeep CJ Funny Car. He calls just another Ecstasy. From Minneapolis, Minnesota, Iskierka will have a chance to set the pace here, as Mike Erdelyi was obviously disqualified for going out of bounds on that incredible rollover. So Iskierka has a chance to set the pace with his 468 cubic inch fuel-injected, alcohol-burning, nitrous oxide-injected Chevy-powered Jeep. Those cut tires, groundhog by brand, dig into the mud, and Iskierka goes through the water that has accumulated on top of the pit, and indeed has to get in and out of the throttle a few different times to make it through. That, however, will be a good pass, good for the #1 spot. Let's take a look at Iskierka's attempt to guide this machine through a rather wet and very rough pit. You can see the machine nose into the mud there. A lot of water spray coming up. Check the tire distortion as he heads down to the 80-foot mark. The elapsed time for Lenny Iskierka, 5.56 seconds as he takes it through the finish line area very, very straight and true. Here's a pretty radical piece of equipment from Wind Lake, Wisconsin. One of the few supercharged funny cars campaigning on the U.S. Hobbit Association National Event Tour. This indeed is an drag strip nitro burner converted over to four-wheel drive mud racing for the U.S. Hobbit Association circuit. Jim Weber in the American-made machine, a 1979 Chevy Vega funny car, using a supercharged fuel-injected 460 cubic inch Chevrolet with a 2-speed power glide automatic transmission. Somewhat unusual in this particular category. Remember, here in the super modified division, the only real rule concerns the tires. They must be no taller than 44 inches tall, and they must be Department of Transportation approved over-the-counter available street tires. However, remember, the teams can alter the tread on these tires in any way, shape, or form that they desire. Weber checks the controls as he clears the throttle, waiting patiently on the starting line. There's the green light, and in and out of the throttle as again the machine noses down at about the 40-foot mark. And obviously Weber has a lot of problems, and that elapsed time certainly won't do him much good, as we still have at least 2 defending world champions coming up in this competition. Weber shakes his hands to the crowd. Let's take a look at the slow motion replay on the green light. A good launch, but that rough spot about 30 feet off the starting line puts the machine sideways. Weber gets in and out of the throttle, tries to straighten it back out, but by the time he does, he gets in trouble again. 6.44 seconds will be good enough only for the number 2 spot for the supercharged funny car from Wisconsin. Off comes the helmet. Jim Weber still pleased that he made it through safe. And indeed, the action will continue here at Byron Dragway with the wildest machines in the sport, the Super Modified Association Championship Super Modified Mud Racing action. And the next driver up to the starting line on this 200-foot-long pit is the winningest Super Modified Mud Racer in U.S. Hobbit Association history. From Independence, Missouri, this is Clay Langley and the Iskierka's Nitro Express 1932 Austin Bantam Roadster using a nitrous oxide-injected small-block Chevrolet for power. The driver with 11 years experience has won 4 U.S. Hobbit Association World Championship titles and is considered by his opponents to be the consummate veteran mud racer. Waiting patiently on the starting line, the 37-year-old patiently keeps an eye on the top end for the signal from the top end starter to go. You can see the fuel-injected small block 393 cubic inch Chevrolet with nitrous oxide injection, and Langley gets bogged down very, very early. Problems with the engine as well. That is not, look at the fire coming out of the right side cylinders. A lot of problems for Clay, and that is not a good sign for the veteran. He's had a rough year. Indeed, Clay Langley is out of the vehicle, immediately checking out the engine damage. He will receive a measurement for this particular attempt, since he did not make it to the finish line. It'll place him in the final standings, but certainly not well. Here on the instant replay, you can see the machine up to the hubs in mud immediately. The objective in the super modified ranks is for the vehicles to get enough forward momentum and tire speed to skim across the top of the mud. Anytime you have to fight the actual mud itself, you're in trouble. The next machine coming up is the Insanity entry of Jeff Acker out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Although he's only been campaigning for the last 5 years, the last 2 seasons have found this young man on the National Championship Tour. A fuel-injected, nitrous oxide-injected 460 cubic inch Chevrolet motor in this 1986 Jeep CJ7 using a 2-speed automatic power glide transmission, which is pretty much the standard for the non-supercharged vehicles. You can see the blue compressed air canister that houses the nitrous oxide, or laughing gas, that is injected into the engine using the oxygen in nitrous oxide for extra horsepower. About 400 extra horsepower above and beyond the 1,200 horsepower that this fuel-injected motor already produces. Lining himself up on the starting line, now taking the green light. An excellent run, but then running over the outer boundaries and suffering some kind of backfire down by the finish line. Acker may or may not have been disqualified on that run, as he did take down some of the banners. Let's check the slow motion replays. You can see the machine already hooking to the near side edge of the berm, then up on the berm, but apparently he has not been officially disqualified. The elapsed time, 4.43 seconds. You can see a wild ride for Jeff Acker down near the finish line will indeed put him number 1 in the program. So Acker at 4.43 seconds sets the mark to beat, and our next competitor is up. Jim Dygas from Chicago, Illinois, will with another one of these Jeep CJ fiberglass-bodied funny car-style machines, this one called Screaming for Vengeance. A 1,500 horsepower fuel-injected, nitrous oxide-injected big block Chevrolet, pretty much the standard power plant of choice among the nation's top mud racers. And unfortunately, Dygas leaves the starting line with some kind of problem that doesn't even give him enough power to make it down to the halfway mark. Dygas nailing the throttle, but now starting to sink. As you can see, the machine go down like a rock, and Dygas' machine right now screaming for assistance more than anything else as he shuts the machine down at about the 50-foot marker or so. A tough break. Taking a look at the instant replay, doesn't appear to be a problem with the drivetrain or the engine, just no power for some reason. Dygas obviously at this point knows that something is not right. Looking down to see if the transmission is in gear, it indeed was. Something else was horribly wrong for the Screaming for Vengeance machine out of Chicago, Illinois. And Dygas with a 40-foot distance will finish well down in the pack here at Byron, Illinois. Being towed back out of the mud, Dygas will make room for the next competitor coming up, and as a matter of fact, it should be the 1987 U.S. Hot-Rod Association World Champion, one of the best ever, Mike Fair, coming up next when we continue. Action. A windy and slightly overcast day has made for perfect performance conditions, especially for this man, one of the winningest mud racers ever to step into a funny car Jeep. This is Mike Fair in the Enforcer, owned by Steve Hanna out of Michigan. Fair, not only the 1987 world champion here in the super modified classes, but as a chassis builder, instrumental in changing the face of the sport over the last 2 years with the strongest and best working machines we've ever seen in a mud pit. This particular machine using a 468 cubic inch big block Chevrolet power plant, fuel injected and using nitrous oxide injection as well. Currently, the national elapsed time record for a 200-foot long pit for U.S. Hot-Rod Association competition is 3.43 seconds. If anybody is going to better that mark here at Byron Dragway, it's going to be this man. Fair leaves the starting line with a little bit of tire spin, but now nails the throttle, rides it out, bouncing all over at the finish line, and puts down easily the strongest run we've seen so far today. The 1987 world champ blasting through with a great run. You can see on the replay, the starting line is getting a little sloppy, and Fair will experience quite a bit of tire spin. But blasting through the top end with the left front wheel up 4.37 seconds puts the 87 world champion the #1 spot. Look at the determination on this driver's face. Concentration is the name of the game, and Fair is one of the best when it comes to figuring out a mud pit, short or long. Look at this thing bouncing over one of the roughest pits we've had to work with in a long, long time, but never lifting off the throttle to take the #1 spot. Unbelievable ride. Here's Byron Tinkey's Bad Habit Chevrolet love truck, and indeed being driven by Don Newsom, this truck has become exceptionally strong. Tinkey's team machines have been on the U.S. Hot-Rod Association National Event Tour now for about 3 years. The little Chevy Love using a big block Chevy Rat motor, and again, nitrous oxide injection from the NOS Corporation. One of the few using a 3-speed automatic transmission. And interestingly, this truck also opts to use shorter tires than most of the other competitors, 40-inch tall groundhogs, available over the counter and are street legal. The machine leaves the starting line very nicely up on top of the mud. The lightweight Chevy Love truck blasts across the finish line. You can see Newsom in the cockpit steering it all the way and doing a beautiful job. And that is going to be an excellent run, possibly good for one of the top 3 spots. The helmet comes off. The 26-year-old from Michigan has to be pretty happy with that particular run on what we have already described as an extremely rough 200-foot long mud pit. Mud sailing everywhere on the perfect launch. The vehicle never sinks down and clocks in the 4-second zone. 4.84 seconds, in fact, is good for the #3 spot behind Mike Fair and Jeff Acker's Insanity Jeep. Excellent attempt for the full-bodied Chevrolet. That will bring up Bob Lacey from Marion, Iowa, with his machine called White Lightning, another altered wheelbase fiberglass body Jeep CJ funny car. However, this one's a little bit different. A 340 cubic inch small block Chrysler engine with nitrous oxide injection from NOS. And Bob Lacey, one of the few to rely on a Mopar power, moves it up on the starting line for his attempt at one of the top 3 positions. The mark to beat still 4.37 seconds by 87 world champ Mike Fair. Lacey gets the signal from the starting line crew to get ready. And now waits patiently for the starter's flag and the green light countdown. He leaves the line, but there's There's no power going to the front end at all. Lacey's going to stay in the throttle with two-wheel drive. The front end starts pushing. He gets sideways, up and out of the pit, then across the pit and down through the banners in a wild, wild ride for the small block Mopar machine from Iowa. On the slow-motion replay, you can see that at the moment he hit the throttle, Lacey never had any power going to the front end of this machine. The elapsed time, 9.53 seconds, will give him one of the top 6 spots right now, but that certainly won't hold up. Now, he never did get any power, and as the machine started to drift to the side, he tried to correct by steering it. At that point, the front end started pushing through the mud over to the berm. The machine rode the dirt, then came back across the track. And again, looking at it from a closer angle, still no power going to the front end at all on that launch. Something wrong with the drivetrain, or at least the front differential. And if nothing else, Lacey showing sheer determination using two-wheel drive to make it almost all the way through this 200-foot-long mud pit. The United States Auto Association's National Event Director, Mr. Ken Done, lines up the next machine, and as a matter of fact, it is one of the wildest this sport has ever seen. From Kansas City, Kansas, this is Ken Krum and the 1978 Subaru Brat pickup called Spoiled Brat. Now, you'll notice a completely different configuration to this vehicle, a very high center of gravity, a narrowed all-steel Subaru body. But the motor behind the driver, and even more interestingly, it's a 331 cubic inch supercharged, fuel-injected DeSoto Hemi engine. There were only a few thousand of these things even produced in the early 1960s. They were a favorite of drag racers back in the early 60s. Again, as you can see, has it running on a healthy load of methanol. A lot of fire out of those exhaust headers. This is always an incredibly wild ride. Krum leaves the line in and out of the throttle as it bounces up on the berm. He then gets back to the throttle again and takes an in-and-out ride past the finish line after a rough starting line launch. And that machine's certainly not able to use the horsepower that it has on tap to its advantage. Here you see on the slow-motion replay just mud sailing everywhere and the explosion from the starting line. Then it hooks immediately to the right, hitting the berm. Krum's hand goes up in the cockpit, almost hits that overhead wing. He gets back in the throttle to record a 5.93 second elapsed time. That is much slower than that vehicle has run in the past. Still, nailing the throttle all the way through. Look at the mud sailing when Ken Krum drops the hammer on 1,500 horsepower in a narrowed Subaru Brat pickup. A wild ride if there ever was one on the U.S. Auto Association National Event Trail. As Krum blasts across the finish line, we'll be back in just a moment with even more championship super modified action, including defending world champ Tom Martin. We'll be back in just a moment. Illinois, as the United States Auto Association's Super Modified Championship Mud Racing Tour continues. And the first machine up in this particular segment of competition is Waukegan, Illinois' Mark Greene. This is a chassis designed by 87 world champ and current leader at this event, Mike Fair, the Mudbuster Jeep CJ with an altered wheelbase and one of the best working suspensions in the business, using a big block 454 cubic inch Chevrolet power plant, interestingly using carburetors rather than fuel injection, but still with the extra added oxygen and horsepower of nitrous oxide. Greene leaves the starting line beautifully, and he is on a ride in and out of the throttle. He takes down the banners and heads for our cameraman, steering hard to the right and finally getting this machine stopped. One of the wildest rides so far in competition. Now, this machine launches perfectly, and look at the ride with the front wheels up in the air. That's what it's all about. Skating sideways at the finish line, 4.53 seconds as he takes down the finish line banners, but that indeed will give him currently the number 3 spot for this awesome Chevrolet-powered Jeep. Remember, the 2 quickest elapsed times in competition here in the Super Modified class will return for the final round shootout. Look at the Mudbuster Jeep blasting across the finish line at almost 100 miles per hour. And you certainly have to give credit to our finish line cameraman, Demp Dempsey. Man, he stuck by his post out there in the worst situation. There's Demp. And good job, buddy. He's having a blast. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the machine everybody's been waiting to see. The 1988 U.S. Auto Association World Super Modified Champion, the Mud Patrol 1932 Ford campaign by Tom Martin, and the driver this weekend, the one and only Greg Stone. Sponsored by Van Stennis Auto Parts, Landgrave Trailers, Megator Converters, and Paul Auto Yards. This is probably the strongest machine in mud racing today. A fuel-injected, nitrous-injected, big block Chevrolet. Here's Greg Stone on the starting line, and an incredible ride, blasting across the finish line, literally all 4 wheels airborne. And it looks like, once again, the Mud Patrol 32 Ford has taken over the number 1 spot. leaving the starting line beautifully, left front wheel in the air. Look at the elapsed time, the quickest 200-foot run in U.S. Harvard Association history. 3.37 seconds. Stone airborne across the finish line on an absolutely picture-perfect effort. Leaving the line immediately up on the tires. The left front wheel comes out of the pit and stays up in the air. Stone just rides it out, never even having to correct on the steering wheel that much at all. What a blast. Airborne down into the shutdown area. #1 again at a new national elapsed time record for the Mud Patrol. There's Greg Stone, no doubt breathless after that incredible 120-mile-per-hour ride through this pit. That is going to be a tough mark to beat. Here's Mike Sneed out of Lakeville, Indiana, in the Jeep he calls Thunder and Heart. Now remember, the 2 quickest elapsed times in this competition will return for the final round showdown. And Sneed would love to be a member of that pair. Indeed, this young man has a tremendous list of second place and third place finishes, but is still looking for his first U.S. Outlaw Association national event victory. A big black Chevrolet again with nitrous oxide injection. This is one of the lightest vehicles in total vehicle weight that runs on the U.S. Outlaw Association Super Modified Tour. 1,800 pounds, whereas most of the killers are down around 2,100 or 2,200 pounds. The Indiana veteran waiting patiently on the line. Nails the throttle. Unfortunately, has to get in and out of the throttle as the tires spin. He stays in it all the way to the end, but a huge nitrous oxide explosion at the finish line. A lot of fire out of the injector on top of the hood of that machine, and that was a pretty scary situation. Apparently an intake valve hanging open and the complete combustion charge of gas, air, and nitrous oxide igniting all the way up through the intake manifold. You can see the machine falling into the mud. Sneed had to get in and out of the throttle, better known as backpedaling in this sport. But then once he hits the nitrous, the machine comes right up out of the mud. Now watch the air scoop in between the exhaust stacks as he heads for the finish line. An intake valve hangs open and kaboom! The fire comes up through the manifold, blowing the foam rubber that protects the engine from mud entering that injector right off of it. And Sneed, of course, shuts her down. He knows darn well exactly what happened. A tough break at 6.53 seconds for the veteran. Well, that will bring up Mike Fair, the 87 world champ, to take on Tom Martin, the 88 world champ, in the first ever side-by-side showdown these two drivers have ever been involved in. And this could be one of the greatest single showdowns we've ever seen in U.S. Outlaw Association racing. Mike Fair back on the line with the Enforcer Jeep. Fuel injected, nitrous oxide injected, big block Chevrolet. Remember, he had 4.37 seconds to get into this final round, but he's 1 full second slower than his arch rival, the 88 world champ, Greg Stone. Staged and ready. Remember, the quickest elapsed time between Fair and Greg Stone will receive the championship here at Byron Dragway. Fair cleans out the motor, now nails the throttle, a little bit of tire spin, but now picking it back up on top of the mud. An excellent run as he comes down off the shutdown area hard. Mike Fair knows he's got to come up with a great pass and is going to have to hope at this point that that effort will hold up against the strongest mud machine in the sport today. The helmet comes off for the chassis builder from Mishawaka, Indiana. Let's take a look at the slow motion replay, and as you can see, a very slippery starting line causes a lot of tire spin. For the Enforcer Jeep, the elapsed time 4.50 seconds, even slower than the run that got him into this final round. But look at the top end charge at over 100 miles per hour, airborne across the finish line. Fair definitely knows how to control a machine at speed. Once again, you can see the phenomenal amount of tire spin that slowed this effort off the starting line. The rest of the run was picture perfect, though. You can see Mike Fair never really had to correct inside that cockpit. That machine was on its own course, straight and true to the finish line with the wheels in the air. Tremendous ride by an absolutely tremendous driver. Well, the fans are obviously enjoying this one as we are down to the final run here in the Super Modified Championship. The question is, can the 88 World Championship vehicle defeat the 87 winner? Here's Greg Stone back with the Mud Patrol 1932 Ford 5-window coupe utilizing Chevrolet motivation. A new national elapsed time record in the first round at 3.37 seconds. His objective now to either back up or better that incredible run to take this win. In reality, he only has to go quicker than 4.50 seconds to win it all. Staged and ready. He nails the throttle immediately up on the mud again. Left front wheel in the air, sideways across the finish line, heading once again for Dempsey, but shutting it down. And Greg Stone knows that that one was a winner. The Mud Patrol 32 Ford once again pulls a win out of their proverbial hat. Look at the mud sailing out of the tires on this machine on the starting line launch. The elapsed time, 3.84 seconds, but look at this crossed-up finish line charge as Stone steers her as best he can and blasts across the finish line, a winner in a picture-perfect victory. The Mud Patrol machine again leaving the line. The Van Sennis Auto Parts, Van Grieve Trailer, Megatorque Converters, Paul Auto Yards, NOS Nitrous Oxide Injection Special, carrying both front wheels for most of the pit, then getting sideways. You can see Stone steered it as long as he could and then just letting her slide. So the Mud Patrol takes it with that new national elapsed time record for 200 feet at 3:37, followed by Mike Fair's Enforcer at 4:37. Jeff Acker's Insanity Jeep gets third at 4:43, followed by Mark Greene's Mudbuster at 4:53, and Don Newsom and Byron Tinkey's Bad Habit at 4.84 seconds for the final standings. Don't even think about changing that dial because we're coming back with the Battle of the Monster Trucks when the U.S. Hot Rod Association Championship action continues. In Illinois, as we get ready for U.S. Hot Rod Association Championship Monster Truck action. Our first vehicle up is Nick Rossi out of Pensacola, New Jersey, in the incredible Jersey Outlaw Ford, a relative newcomer to the ranks of monster truck racing. He'll be the first man out on this 900-foot-long horseshoe-shaped track and qualifying for a 6-truck field that will come back for side-by-side eliminations. The objective here on this course is to go down a straightaway over a set of 3 different cars, make a hard right U-turn in a relatively narrow area, come back over several different sets of cars to the start-finish line. And indeed, this is against the clock. Like I said, Nick Rossi, a relative newcomer to this sport, but with a beautiful, beautiful truck. The Jersey Outlaw 1988 Ford pickup, utilizing a 472 cubic inch carbureted Ford wedge motor, standing over 11 feet 8 inches high, weighing 14,000 pounds, and costing over $95,000. And a hard landing there as he has already made the right-hand turn. A lot of smoke coming out of the engine compartment. He may have hurt the power steering unit. Looks like a little bit of power steering fluid sprayed on the hot exhaust headers, creating that smoke display there. As he moves up to the last set of cars, he'll get a chance to pace the field here as far as the lap times go. Up and over the last set of cars, and obviously Rossi is attempting to take it a little bit easier since he too can see the smoke coming out of the engine compartment from up 12 feet in the air inside that Ford's cockpit. So Rossi crosses the start-finish line, and here is the time, 1 minute 25.32 seconds. That'll be the mark to beat. And here's the Big Red from Nebraska, being driven by Gary Schram, a 1976 Chevrolet, using, of all things, a 350 cubic inch small block Chevrolet power plant. Schram hanging out of the driver's side window, negotiating the next set of cars before making that hard right turn. And as you can see, Schram is not in any great hurry to do any damage to this incredible 12,000-pound lightweight racing truck. The $110,000 machine makes that right-hand turn and now prepares to come down the home stretch, as it were. He'll hit 2 different sets of cars and land against the clock, and having some problems with that particular set of machines. Now, finally getting all 4 wheels down on the ground, he'll make tracks to the last set of cars. Top speed on these machines very seldom exceeding 35 miles per hour because of the gearing. You can see Schram slowing down for the last set of cars now, making the hit quite nicely, as a matter of fact. He'll cover that long line of crushed cars, hit back down to the ground, and stops the clocks at 1.04.13 seconds. So that'll be the mark to beat, 1.04 seconds at this point. And here's the hometown favorite here at Byron Dragway from right up Illinois Route 47 in Woodstock, Illinois. This is Rob Fuchs's Ford called First Blood. Another relative newcomer, but you can hear the fans already cheering for the 28-year-old professional monster truck driver as he is on a ride. No question about it. Look at that tremendous airborne jump. The crowd loves it as Rob Fuchs wants more than anything to beat the big names here in his hometown. Whoa, spinning the machine out on that turn. That is going to cost Rob some time. But he gets back in the throttle immediately to try and make up the distance. Good landing, bouncing around a little bit. He nails the throttle again in the 466 cubic inch Ford truck. Look at the speed coming up on these cars. Good hit, airborne. The crowd loves it. He lands and stops the clock at 46.02 seconds. A little bit of body damage on that hard landing. You can see the front end up in the air, but the crowd is thrilled with the the #1 qualifying performance of the Woodstock, Illinois youngster. Let's take a look at the slow motion replay and see if we can figure out where that front end damage came from. 6 feet in the air. He lands it very, very nicely. Taking a rough ride in the cockpit. He comes up on the dirt berm, nails the throttle. The front end comes up and he starts sliding towards the concrete retaining wall and hits it. You can see the right front wheel taking a hard turn. That's why the front end came up, as obviously Rob Fuchs has actually driven into the concrete retaining wall. Sure enough, there he is pulling it off the wall. You can see the front end body panel damage, and hopefully there is not too much chassis damage that will keep him from coming back around in the first round. Meanwhile, we continue qualifying with a very, very unique piece of equipment. From St. Louis, Missouri, this is Ray Piorkowski, and the machine he calls Big Toe. Believe it or not, a fully operational Ford tow truck, weighing in at an honest 20,000 pounds, one of the heaviest trucks you'll ever see. I think that was actually one of the seat backs coming up in front of Piorkowski's face there when he landed. He'll drive it down to make the U-turn, brings it up to the last set of cars. The 20,000-pounder in the air, landing on the third and final car. Now put it back on the ground and make that turnaround. The supercharged big block Ford power plant at this incredible machine out of St. Louis. He owns, by the way, a major towing service in St. Louis, Missouri, Superior Towing. And therefore he uses this machine not only for monster truck racing, but as a heck of a promotion for his own business. Nail in the throttle one more time to get it up and over the first set of cars on the back straight. And now landing it for the last ride down to the start-finish line. The mark to beat, 46 seconds by Rob Fuchs' first blood. I don't think Piorkowski has to worry about qualifying #1 in this stint. I think he just wants to get it around and into this field. 7 trucks, by the way, trying to qualify for this 6-vehicle open show. Piorkowski lands the machine, takes it across the finish line nice and easy. As a matter of fact, an excellent elapsed time. 1 minute, 14.72 seconds. An excellent run, and Piorkowski should qualify well into the field. Here's the Night Stalker, a full-body 1979 Ford F-250 Ranger XLT Lariat from Stoughton, Wisconsin. Steve Combs doing the driving of another big heavyweight, 19,000 pounds for this full-bodied Ford, using a supercharged 460 cubic inch Ford power plant. He moves it up to negotiate this tricky set of 3 cars before making the turnaround to the back straight. Slowing down to negotiate them cleanly now. He'll move it up for the U-turn. A $100,000 vehicle and a brand new entry of the United States Honda Association National Event Trail. Without a doubt, one of the cleaner Ford products we've seen in quite some time. Looks like he may be having some problems there negotiating that U-turn and moving up to the next set of cars very, very slowly. It certainly appears as Coombs nails the throttle. Yep, there it goes. We've got problems with the rear drive shaft, as you can see. Apparently, in hitting the last set of 3 cars before the U-turn, a drive shaft problem was making literally the rear wheels ineffective at that point. He hits this set of cars, goes up at an angle, but apparently there was no power going to the rear wheels. He lands a little bit sideways, and at least one of the rear wheels was receiving power, but not much else, and he'll shut it down well before the finish line area. Unfortunately, an incomplete run for Steve Coombs, the Night Stalker. There you see event director Ken Donay getting ready to hook up the Wisconsin Ford. It looks, however, like Coombs may be able to drive it off the track under his own power. A tough break for a newcomer, but I think you'll be seeing a lot more from the 19,000-pound Night Stalker Ford in future U.S. Auto Association competition. Another relative newcomer to monster truck racing is this young man, DaveStaszak, in the Mr. Twister 1987 Ford short bed pickup. A short wheelbase monster truck, lightweight at 12,000 pounds, built for monster truck racing. You can see him leaving the starting line on the first line of crushed cars, taking his time. Once he gets it down on the ground, I'm sure he'll nail a big 464. There we go. Under power, head right for the camera. Over the last set of crushed cars on the first straightaway. Negotiating them quite well for that better. The mark to beat here in this qualifying round. Still 46 seconds by the first blood Ford of Woodstock, Illinois' Rob Fuchs. The Schofield, Wisconsin driver DaveStaszak trying to better that mark. As you can see, using the independent front and rear steering that has become standard equipment on virtually any monster truck built for competition. He now lines himself up with one more set of crushed cars. Rather large hit there as the front end gets up and a little bit sideways. Staszak has to negotiate coming off those cars a little bit tougher, but now really stops on the throttle as he heads for the last set of crushed cars to try and get a decent enough elapsed time to make it into this field. Actually, with the problems just experienced by the Night Stalker, all Staszik really has to do is complete the course, and he'll be guaranteed a qualifying berth in this 6-truck program. Brings it over across the finish line, and now down to stop the elapsed timers at 1 minute 21.01 seconds, and that will currently put him in the number 4 position here in this 6-truck lineup. So the Mr. Twister machine makes it into the program, and here is the final qualifying attempt. A very, very popular truck in the Midwestern part of the country. Mark Ryckaert from Taylor Ridge, Illinois. The 1975 Ford F-250 called Intimidator. A wild, wild landing there off the first set of crush cars as the 428 Cobra Jet powered F-250 moves it up to the last set of crush cars on the front straight. Big wheel stand as he lands nice and clean. And now gets ready to swing around to the back straight. The Taylor Ridge, Illinois Ford pilot, again, one of the local favorites here in one of his first big national championship events. He's got to better 46 seconds by Rob Fuchs's First Blood Ford, and he is actually doing pretty good here. A little bit of a rough landing there on those 3 cars, but now he steps on that 428 Cobra Jet and heads for the last set of cars. Bringing it up. He makes the last hit very easily, trying to keep it close to the ground to maximize his elapsed time. The hood flops around. He nails it across the finish line and records a tremendous elapsed time of 56.31 seconds. That's good for number 2, but we'll be back with side-by-side monster truck eliminations coming up next. Monster truck action. We're now going into eliminations. 6 qualifiers will battle it out. The low qualifier, Rob Fuchs in the First Blood Ford, has been given an advancement into the semifinals on a Byron. And now we get into side-by-side action to determine the other semifinalists. In the near lane from Pensacola, New Jersey, it's Nick Rossi in the Jersey Outlaw against Gary Schram in Nebraska's Big Red. And Big Red runs into problems, and it will be a free ride for Nick Rossi to move up to the last set of cars and complete this run as the Chevrolet from Lincoln, Nebraska of Gary Schram ran into problems almost immediately. There's Schram leaving the course. He has got to be disappointed. But newcomer Nick Rossi, in his sophomore year of monster truck racing, indeed puts down a good effort to advance to the semifinals in this straight drag racing style elimination format program. There you can see the problem that caused Schram to get out of the throttle. He indeed got sideways, almost headed for the mud pit. Meanwhile, in the other lane, in slow motion replay, you can see Nick Rossi being thrown around inside the cockpit of the incredible Jersey Outlaw Ford as he advances into the semifinal round, sticking with the throttle. You see Gary Schram leaving the Byron Dragway course with his unique gold wing doors on this small block Chevrolet powered machine, unfortunately going out of competition in the first round. That will bring up an Illinois favorite, the Intimidator of Mark Ryckaert against the Mr. Twister 1987 Ford of Wisconsin DaveStaszak. The side-by-side launch, they leave the line on the green like Christmas tree start, and the Mr. Twister Wisconsin machine ekes out about a 3-foot lead. The Intimidator Ford is not going to give up, though, and this will be a battle down to the finish line. The Intimidator riding off the berm of the mud pit and getting a little squirrely. The Mr. Twister Ford of Staszik stays with it to record the win. A tremendously close battle, and the first round win for Staszik ever in U.S. Off-Road Association competition. Here you can see the Intimidator with the left rear tire muddy from hitting that mud pit, getting a little sideways in approaching these cars. He nails them hard, but you can see lands a little bit sideways and takes a wild bounce after coming back to earth. The front end still bouncing up and over as Mr. Twister in the other lane indeed hit those last set of cars just about perfect. Stasik's 12,000-pound lightweight 87 Ford short bed truck, a $130,000 masterpiece. In its first ever U.S. Off-Road Association event, takes one of the hardest hits we've seen at this event so far. The front end going straight up and then coming back down to ground to take the victory. From St. Louis, Missouri, it will be Ray Piorkowski's big tow truck and the last qualifier, Steve Combs' Night Stalker, which ran into problems during the qualifying round. Piorkowski's 20,000-pound Ford tow truck gets a huge advantage. Comes off the first set of cars a little rough, but meanwhile the Night Stalker nails the throttle to try and close the gap. Side-by-side monster truck action with the Wisconsin Night Stalker trying to come from behind. He's not going to do it, and he knows it. Slowing down to save the equipment on that last set of cars. He saw Piorkowski's big toe go across the finish line well ahead of the Wisconsin full-bodied 79 Ford, and the big tow machine will also advance to the semifinals for the St. Louisan. Take a look at this 20,000-pounder as it clears the first set of crush cars. Piorkowski with his head out the driver's side window, trying to steer and negotiate by keeping an eye on that left front tire. But man, this thing is a rough ride because of the exceptional vehicle weight of this supercharged big block Ford-powered tow truck. Piorkowski was landing quite nicely as the Stalker machine was busy taking the first set of crush cars at a pretty decent clip. But as soon as Piorkowski gained a serious advantage, Combs decided to save the equipment for the next U.S. Off-Road Association event. Look at this thing flexing, a tremendously strong vehicle that, like I said before, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of on the U.S. Off-Road Association National Event Trail. Well, the fans are ready for more monster truck competition. Now, we've already seen the quickest first-round winner, Ray Piorkowski's Big Toe, advance to the final round to take on the low qualifier, Rob Fuchs's First Blood. But we still have two consolation battles to go, and these should be wild. The Nebraska's Big Red of Gary Schram, the Chevrolet with small block power in the far lane, takes on the wild new Mr. Twister 87 Ford of Wisconsin's DaveStaszak in this consolation round. The Nebraska's Big Red machine comes off a little bit sideways from the first set of cars, but it is still a door-to-door, wheel-to-wheel monster truck battle going up to the last set of crush cars. Mr. Twister hits him first, but bogs out, and that will let the Chevrolet move in. A great side-by-side finish, and the Ford comes back to win it by only a matter of inches. Here, hanging out of the driver's side window on the replay, you can see Gary Schram, the Lincoln, Nebraska newcomer with the small block Chevrolet-powered Big Red machine, trying to negotiate the same set of cars that gave him problems in that first qualifying round for the final round championship. Hanging out the window, keeping an eye on that left front wheel. It came down a little bit sideways again, but this time Schram was able to recover and give the Mr. Twister Ford a definite run all the way down to the finish line. But watch Stasek in the other lane, straight up on a tremendous hit, then coming down nose first. That bogged the motor in the new 87 Ford short bed monster machine, but Stasek nailed the throttle to take the win by less than 5 feet in a tremendously close dash here at Byron Dragway. We still have one more consolation battle to go, though, including Nick Rossi's Jersey Outlaw from Pensacola, New Jersey, and this machine, the Ford from Taylor Ridge, Illinois, of Mark Ryckaert, the Intimidator. A big hole shot at the green light for the Jersey Outlaw, but the Intimidator starts to reel him in, and we've got another incredibly close battle. The Intimidator goes back out in front as Rossi runs into problems, and now it's a real dash to the finish line. Look at Rossi trying to reel him in, both in the air at the same time, both landing incredibly hard, and Rossi gets back in the throttle to take the win. Look at this incredible hit. Unbelievable landing as Rossi is thrown all over in the cockpit of that machine. He manages to stab the throttle with the wheels in the air to get back out in front of the Illinois Intimidator in a wild dash. Let's take a look at Ryckaert's problems as he puts the nose straight up on this hit of the Intimidator and also comes down nose first in a tremendously rough landing, bogging the motor and allowing the white Ford from New Jersey to come back around for the victory. An incredible side-by-side dash, but the championship final is still to come. Stay with us. In Byron, Illinois, and ready for the championship finale for the U.S. Off-Road Association's Monster Truck Championships. Ray Piorkowski from St. Louis, Missouri, in the Big Toe Ford tow truck will be taking on this man, your low qualifier, Rob Fuchs, in Illinois' own First Blood. You can see the bent front end for the local Illinois racer after he hit the wall on that qualifying run. The green light comes on, however, and Piorkowski immediately falls back by a few feet, now starts to come back around as Fuchs in the First Blood machine rides the firm of the mud pit. Now, Fuchs in the First Blood entry starts to drive away. He moves up for the last hit, getting airborne. Look at Piorkowski. Unbelievable landing in the incredible Big Toe Ford. Look at this hit, and then watch the front end sheet metal as the wheels come up and literally tear the front end off that 20,000-pound truck. A tremendous and gallant runner-up effort for Ray Piorkowski's Big Toe, but here's the winner, Rob Fuchs, taking his first ever national event championship in front of his hometown crowd in the incredible First Blood Ford. The only problem he had on that winning run was when the truck actually went up into the mud pit, but he straightened it out and took it through for the win. From what we understand from our event director, Ken Donay, Nick Rossi, the newcomer in the Jersey Outlaw, has challenged Fuchs in the First Blood Ford to a match race. They are back up on the starting line. They both want to go for it, so Ken Donay said, fine, you guys can race. We'll watch. Here's the Outlaw Ford, and here's your winner, Rob Fuchs, taking on the second challenge in front of his hometown fans. They are side by side in an unscheduled brunch match. The Outlaw runs into some problems. Fuchs is driving away again. The Outlaw Outlaw starts to reel him in at the last set of cars. Fuchs, an incredible airborne jump sideways, and even the Outlaw gets crazy. But the crowd goes berserk as Rob Fuchs takes on all comers here at his hometown track and wins again in this unscheduled match race. Take a look at this airborne leap at the finish line. Rossi noses this thing into the concrete here at Byron Dragway and takes a wild, wild ride, but it still wasn't enough to get back around Rob Fuchs. Unbelievable battle that was just an extra added attraction here for the fans at Byron Dragway. Here's the incredible flight of the First Blood Ford in this grudge match. Look at this launch, clearing all three cars, and then a rough landing for a machine that has already felt the abuse of this incredible event. Fuchs manages to keep the machine upright and takes another victory. Well, the crowd is just about out of breath, but we have one more vehicle coming out, and it's an exhibition run by the machine that started the tank craze. This is an Army M4 tank campaign during World War II with a rear-mounted, supercharged, fuel-injected Chevrolet Rat motor and a Chevy Blazer truck body. The original Virginia Beach Beast, owned by Bill Towns and driven here this weekend by Donnie Kessel. An amazing piece of equipment at 21,000 pounds. Look at that landing. And you have to remember these vehicles have no suspension, and it's one of the roughest rides for any driver in any form of motorsports. Kessel out thrilling the crowd with the antics of the 21,000-pound machine that doesn't just jump over the cars, it drives right through them. Now watch the landing that Kessel takes in the cockpit here. Man, that's a rough ride. No suspension to take the brunt of the impact. He comes down hard. Remember, this machine does not use a steering wheel to guide it. It's actually a twin-stick system, like a tank or a bulldozer, in which the driver applies or takes away power to each of the driving tracks. There's a nice little spin. It shows you just how quick and tight these things can corner. The crowd ready and waiting for Mike Cass to take another hit on what's left of these crush cars. Huge leaping jump, and they love that landing. An amazing job by Virginia Beach's own Donnie Kessel at the wheel of Will Towns' awesome Virginia Beach Beast. A $90,000 masterpiece that 3 years ago was the first ever to incorporate military tank technology and monster truck styling to become one of the first of a new wave of monster machines. Another tremendous landing for Donnie Kessel at the wheel of this incredible vehicle that has spawned over 24 imitations of the original tank monster. Kessel opens up the door and salutes the Byron Dragway crowd, and we'll be back in just a moment. Tour continues. We had a bit of an upset today in the monster truck ranks as Rob Fuchs from Woodstock, Illinois, just up the road, took his first blood machine to the win in front of a hometown crowd despite the appearances of some of the biggest and best monster trucks in the business here today. And in the super modified mud racing ranks, it doesn't seem to matter whether Greg Stone or Tom Martin is doing the driving of the 1932 Ford Mud Patrol. The defending 1988 World Super Modified Champion came through with another big victory and a new elapsed time national record in under 3.5 seconds on a 200-foot-long mud pit. By the way, those of you who are concerned about Mike Erdelyi and the incredible Mud Shark Corvette after that devastating flip, he has already announced that he will rebuild the car and will be back on the U.S. Auto Association National Event Trail immediately. And, of course, we did get a chance to see returning 1987 World Champion Mike Fair back at the wheel of the Enforcer Jeep on his way to a great runner-up finish. We've got a lot more U.S. Auto Association monster truck and mud racing action to come, but on behalf of myself, Brett Kepner, the United States Auto Association, SRO, Pace Productions, and ESPN, thanks for being with us here today at Byron Dragway. We'll see you at the next U.S. Auto